papers regarding the appointment of the chairperson of GCOM, whether those people were spoken to, whether the information was accurate or not, and whether I plan to submit those names to the president. But as you're aware, I've spent the last week in the Rupunoni, I'm in Region 9, visiting several villages. We had interaction with people from over 20 villages. Many of them came to meetings, and I'll speak about that in a moment. So I was out of contact with the coast. Having said that, I hope that GT&T and Digicel would look at places like Karasabay, huge villages that don't have any form of connection or communication with the coast to improve those communication. So let me say now that the process, having returned to Georgetown, the process will continue. I've now concluded that process of talking to people, and I think it would be premature of me to deny or conform whether those are the names that I've spoken to or I will be submitting on the to the president as part of the final group of 6 persons. So I will keep you posted on this matter. I suspect that within a week or so, I would have completed the consultations and the names will be sent to the president. Secondly, as I pointed out to you, I was in the interior, and residents in Region 9 are very, very concerned about what is happening in the country, but more particularly about what is happening in their region. And so we have we shared a lot of information about what's taking place on the coast. Many people were concerned about the appointment, the unilateral appointment by the president of a commission of inquiry into the land issues. It was pointed out to them that not just by the People's Progressive Party, but the chairman of the National Tushaus Council, who met with all of the Tushaus in a regional Tushaus meeting in Letem, that they were not consulted on the matter. They had no part in working out the terms of reference, and they are totally opposed to such a commission in place. And so that information was available to the Tushaus. The Minister of Indigenous Affairs was there at the same meeting, and I gather he was upset with the chairman of the National Tushaus Council for bringing this up at the meeting. Now, this is the same minister who, when he campaigned years ago against us, spoke about lack of consultation with communities and the belief that we were in violation of what has been a standard thing, this free, prior, informed consent for any issue relating to Amerindian people. And so how could the minister now support an initiative that all the Tushaus of Guyana are against? These are the elected leaders of the Amerindian communities, and all the NGOs are against, every single Amerindian NGO. It smacks of opportunism, a retreat from principles, and this government simply does not care what people think. And I see the president talking and making lofty statements about being president for all of Guyana. The reality is very different from the practice. And so the villagers were very concerned about this issue. They're concerned about the revision of the Amerindian Act, which is what we've heard a lot about from the government, but no consultation again with the Tushaus Council about the content of the revision, or the villagers themselves, or the NGOs. And we made it clear that if should there be any need to revise the Act, the revision, these appropriate amendments must come from the villagers themselves and from people, that it can't be an exercise done centrally by the Office of the President. Because if it's done that way, it will undermine the rights of Amerindian people. And we have seen it already when you have advisors in the Office of the President trying to make a case that Amerindian people's land issues should not have special consideration, although there's been a historical promise from the colonial times to now, and that promise has been recognized by almost all the governments, including the PNC in the past, to Amerindian people. And so this is a big issue. Of course, they spoke about the sloth in the village economies, etc. But contrast that, I think the government went into a little overdrive when they heard we were in the Rupunoni. So they heard we were giving out a couple of kites to the kids. So Norton then chartered a plane to just fly kites into Aishalton and drop them off and then go on. That is how we're using social cohesion funds. But the kites were too heavy, they didn't fly. So the thing is that they just went crazy around the country, which is a normal outreach to villages because we went there. They just started flying things and dropping off things in the interior without even talking to people. So that one, if he had only stopped to talk to the people of Aishalton, he would have heard their concerns. In fact, one guy said to me, he told, anyhow, that's a bit personal. But that's a bit personal. But he would have heard the concerns of the people there. Their concerns about the inability to find markets for their products because of the overall slowdown in the economy of the country and the region. And Lethem itself, sales have fallen by over 30–40%, people said. They can't sell their farine, they can't sell a lot of the things they produce. And all the commitments made by the government have not been kept. So as part of the overdrive, the panic that the government went into, because they saw us in the hinterland, I saw they got the Chronicle to join the act. And so Chronicle did a story about Quatamang today in the North Rupunoni and spoke about this HAZE program and how it's doing a wonderful vegetable garden there for people. And I met with people in the North Rupunoni, in Anai, and people from Quatamang and Waweta, the riverine areas and the neighboring communities came, Rewa, etc., several communities. And they should have heard the complaints of people. One woman went to Lethem. She doesn't have money. She was told to go there for an ultrasound. She went there. The ultrasound machine is down for a month now. A person who has a son who needs specialized drugs that he was always getting, now he can't get the drugs. We committed to send in the drugs for those two persons. But of course, it's a systemic problem. The people in the riverine areas now have to pay, which they never did before, a $10,000 boat licensing fee and a $35,000 registration fee $45,000 they will now have to pay. In Fairview, the Tushaus got a stack of documents from GRA to send out to people. They've already started changing the policy in the Rupunoni where we allowed, and I saw them criticizing us for it. They said the country is leaking revenue, $40 million, I think, a week. Just a couple of days ago, I saw an article because Jagdeo allowed people to bring in their goods free of taxes in the remote areas of our country. It is true. It is true, but we did it for a purpose. And we didn't say, if you're PNC, you didn't get it, or if you're PPP, you got it. All the residents enjoy the same benefit because we wanted to keep cost of living down. They're changing that now. We didn't see it as a loss of revenue. We saw it as an increase in welfare. They're changing all of these things in these regions now, creating greater hardships and more problems for people. So the Guatemalan story in today's Chronicle about this vegetable garden funded by Hayes, let me tell you a bit about Hayes. They introduced Hayes after we complained about the termination of the 1,972 CSOs. Those 1,972 CSOs that they told, many of them in the Rupunoni, they were only getting $30,000 a month. If they get into office, they'll pay them $90,000 a month. That we're paying them too little. So people were expecting, those workers were expecting this, should the coalition win, they'll get 200% increase. They lost their jobs. They terminated all of them, all 1,972 of them. Replace this with some Hayes program, but guess what the villages lost in that process? We have pointed this out several times. 1,972 multiplied by 30,000 a month, multiplied by 12 months in the year, it's over $700 million a year spent in those villages on wages and salaries for those people. They withdrew over $700 million from the village economies in those areas. Why do they think they have a slowdown? And now boasting about this, he is a kitchen garden in Guatemala. And so Chronicle is part, as I pointed out again, it might be a wonderful thing. It's good to highlight what people are doing, but the big picture is not told about the misery in those areas. I went to Tiger Pond. The health worker said, please come with me. I didn't even want to go because I didn't want to get involved in the politics and have them go and fire him later because they're very partisan. You know, but when I went into the room, nothing. Yes, a couple of bottles there, said no drugs here. They live in the mountains, in the remote part of the country. If that's it. And then people said to me that in the campaign they used to call the people PPP, Sidney Alicock and Norton and all of them, the Panadol Progressive Party, because they said everything under the PPP used to get Panadol for toothache, headache, etc., which isn't true. But people saying now they're not even getting the Panadol. So it was funny, but it's tragic. When you live in those areas, when you live in remote areas, and you can't get basic drugs. And we hear a lot about these visits, etc. So that's one. Two, I just want to go through a couple of the articles today. I'm glad that finally that the Starbuck News asked Trotman some key questions, because it's hard to get information from him about, and clear information about what is being done in a critical sector of our economy in the future, oil and gas. So we hear different things at different times from him, often contradictory things. And I put that down to politics. So first of all, Trotman set aside a huge sum of money in the budget, and he is using this money as a slush fund, ostensibly for consultations around the country. But it is a huge slush fund, like how Norton would use social cohesion fund just to fly in to drop off kites. He's using this money now as a slush fund to go around the country. I don't know if it's for individual profiling, but definitely to do political work. Because Starbuck News article pointed out that several of the issues were not pertinent to his ministry. In fact, if you're doing that, he could easily do a newsletter with clear or print a clear article about their approach to oil and gas and hand it out to people. 10,000 copies and say, here is what's going to be done. We're going to amend the law, and here is what we're going to amend the law, how we're going to amend the law. Secondly, we are going to insist that we build capacity in Guyana, so we are doing the following things. Thirdly, we are putting in place a sovereign wealth fund. And as part of the sovereign wealth fund, here is how you'll access the funds. And then these are the sectors would benefit. You don't need to go out and spend tens of millions of dollars talking often to 7 persons, like a Tapajinga, who turned up to a public meeting that he had there, a public meeting, and it's more effective that way. But you know why he would not do that? Because it requires clarity, putting these things down on paper. You can't play too much politics with it, and then you're caught with it later. You'd have to explain it, why you are doing this. He could easily do that. But he has not done this, so we hear all sorts of things and different messages. Don't worry, in 2020 you're going to have a large number of jobs. We hear the Crab Island project is going ahead, that by 2020 it would be completed. I want to wager a lot, if I had, anything, even my politics. Politically, I was going to place a wager that would be unbelievable, that this will not be completed. Put a political wager. This will not be completed. They're living up in the sky. Who is going to put 500 million? They've shifted. They keep shifting. One time it's private sector, another time it's government. They can't raise $500 million US to build this facility. And the private sector will not do that unless they have a guarantee of somebody to sell their services to. And ExxonMobil has not given that guarantee to anyone. So you've got to be extremely stupid as an investor to spend $500 million without any contract to supply people though. This is unbelievable. And this charlatan kind of analysis that Trotman is prone to give passes off as hope for the future, as a project that will be built. It's not going to happen. And we're very concerned now. We're hearing, oh, they'll give the money to regions, not individuals maybe. But they have not even decided on the elements of the Sovereign Wealth Fund and how you'll access those. But they're already talking about how the money will be given out. And you may not have even money when that period comes. What if 2020 the oil prices are low? And then the people have to clear billions of dollars of expenses before money, well, to share the benefits. It is spending money that we don't have as yet, building hopes for the future. And Trotman has a slush fund that he's using to do politics now. The next thing is the president in West Coast Berbice. Now, I know that they give money to all of these organizations. They've been given money to some religious organizations, some private sector organizations when they're hosting activities. But the money comes with a price. So the people have to put some government official to speak, either the president, the prime minister, or the minister of business. If they don't do that, no money for them. So a lot of these places, these organizers are caught with this issue. I remember we gave ACDA $3 million per annum approximately, but I never spoke at ACDA functions. No government official. We just gave them the check. There was even no request from the government to speak. They came, they requested the funds, we gave the funds for the Emancipation Day activity, and nobody from the government spoke at the activity. Very different approach. With these guys, you have to, if you take money from the government to fund an activity, it comes along with a baggage. Now, the president shows up in West Coast Bobbies, and he says, once you take the oath before the president, you become non-political. So, and he was talking about the regional chair and the others. And then he says, this is how I manage Guyana, I'm not political. And this is the same president whose people, just a few nights before that, shut down a debate on the bill. This is how Parliament operates under him. Very partisan. Very partisan. All the big lofty thing about working together and having full discussions and discussing plans for the future. They shut down a debate on the SARA bill. They would not allow a debate on the land issue, the Amerindian land issue. What's so wrong with debate in a free society? At the end of the day, you can make your decision. This is the same president who, without any public tender, hired a bunch of political hacks in the office of the president. Their only qualification is they are political hacks and haters of the PPP to staff the so-called SARU unit. Clive Thomas, Trotman, Ogunse, Hetimaya, Eric Phillips. These are political hacks, PPP haters who have written about the PPP long before they're there. What sort of open, fair, transparent process he used to hire these people? So people should listen to the president when he says these things and then think about the reality of Guyana and the reality of his administration. It's a very, very partisan administration, and blatantly so. So when all these big talks, look at what's going on. The president himself swore in the mayor of Mabaruma, although there is a court order preventing him from doing so, because there is a tie in that community. And he talks about serving all Guyana and acting in a non-partisan way, and lectures the people in West Coast Bobbies about this. Now, president goes there, and then he says, we are keeping Blaemont, we're keeping Albion and Iflot, but the cost at Iflot is worrisome. And the headlines scream the government to keep these. So we have suddenly switched the headlines from closure to what they're keeping, and we must be grateful that they're keeping these three estates. And we forget Rose Hall, Wales, Enmore, and Skeldon, and the people who live there and all the attendant problems. He did not deal with even the IMF, what the IMF said, about the tremendous social consequences to these communities. He didn't deal with his own refusal to look at to accept the Commission of Inquiry report. He didn't talk about the promise to table the white paper long before they announced any definitive position, the white paper in Parliament, so that the opposition would have a say. None of that. So that commitment was made, just went out the window. He announced the decisions, he's head of state, so it is pure nonsense now to go and table the paper, because it's only tabled for information, not for any debate, because the president has already announced what is going to happen. And this is a president who goes in West Coast bubbies to tell people to produce more. And he has just increased land rentals and water charges from $3,500 to $15,000 per acre per year for some categories of land, and then for other categories the percentage is the same, almost 600% for the cattle rearers, etc. His administration just put a 14% tax on agricultural implements, plows, harrows, tractors combined. They've put a 14% tax on fertilizer, pesticides, all of the things that the farmers use. And he talks about this region doing so well in agriculture. They did well because they had supportive policies, a supportive environment. You took that away from them and then goes to lecture people in West Coast bubbies. How much more hollow can you get, or devoid of any connection with reality, as though you don't even know what your own government is doing and how counterproductive it is. And I wonder who prepares these speeches. So all of this thing about, when I listened to this speech, and I read what he said, I'm just thinking, how can you get this government to face reality? And that brings me to face reality. It brings me to the next point. So they now have a couple of people. They've gone in overdrive again to talk about the economy doing badly because of drug money. And now I see a new thing emerging, that it's the PPP sabotaging the economy. That's why it's doing badly. And of course, the Kaichor news is in the forefront of this campaign. I'll tell you one day, I tell you why, because the staff, and I don't want to say anything about the staff here, because they have an editorial policy. And the editorial policy comes from the owner, and how much in bed with the administration he is, because we have a long list of things that they have done for him and threats they have against him for criminal behavior. So they're using both the carrot and stick to determine the outlook of the paper. And that has nothing to do with the staff. So another day I'll deal with that. Today I just wanted to say that this seems to be the new thing. So it got to be drug money that was keeping Guyana afloat. That's what they're saying. So I see the Saru people now gone into overdrive, and Kaichor News. These are the front line that waging the campaign. But let's look at this here, the IMF reports. So how have we seen this manifestation of drugs money dropping? I don't hear a drug dealer getting caught. They've seized assets from a drug dealer. I don't see any drop in the drug trade, because in fact, if what is happening in fuel smuggling is any indication of what's happening in the drug trade, we may very well have more drug trafficking now than ever before. Because since the government change, we have had 3 huge gangs supported by the office of the president, and we have pointed this out several occasions. Some businessmen who are sympathetic to the AFC and the others were part of one fuel smuggling ring. And if you just want to know, throw a stone in the bush. The media seems not to be throwing enough stones in the bush. Another gang provided by a prominent lawyer and a very family member of a senior government official, and a third gang by some people who we know, it was written about in the mainstream media, who got new licenses now to import fuel. We should check all of these things. We should check what's happening on the wharves just here. So I see this new thing now. Customs is going after the people in the interior for fuel smuggling. And then they caught a big story like this in the newspapers. They caught somebody with 38 drums of fuel. And right here before our eyes, we have 3 large new fuel smuggling gangs supported by this government that we have asked them to look at investigations into. And nothing has come out of those investigations because they're protected by the office of the president. And so if that is an indication, the illegality that they're tolerating there, we may very well have more drug money in the country. In fact, 4 Guyanese were caught with the biggest drug haul since when? About 15 years now. The biggest drug haul in about 15 years. And not caught here. Could it be that this drug came out of Guyana? So we have seen no evidence absolutely that they have done anything to block any drug trafficking. In fact, from what I know, is that they are supporting more illegality. There's a big rip-off in the smuggling of fuel now and some of the other things. So that excuse wouldn't hold any water. And the PPP is sabotaging the economy. They're saying that suddenly, the PPP took all the money in Guyana and bought up all the foreign currency and holding it downstairs of Freedom House. So that's why we have a shortage in Guyana now. That is why. Not because of the collapse of the economy. Every single person, we pointed this out. The IDB pointed this out. The IMF pointed this out. 1, there's been a decrease in supply of foreign currency to the market. From every sector, the IDB report, from excepting gold, every single other sector has earned less in foreign currency. The foreign direct investment has dropped. The remittances have dropped. Now, the IDB and the IMF were in a conspiracy with the government, with the PPP, and I saw this lame excuse from the central bank. Lame excuse saying, oh, we're paying less on fuel, so the rate would be stable. We're paying late. We were paying less. The fuel bill has gone up from last year to this year. Will go up by $100 million. It fell steeply between 2014 to 2016, but it's climbing again. So the demand is growing. And that is why you have a pressure. And we don't have a freely determined exchange rate any longer. This government has destroyed it. They've kept the rate at 215 because of bullyism and because of executive fiat, breaching the laws, bullying people to sell their money at a particular rate, forcing the banks to buy at a particular rate, saying to them you can't sell above a certain rate by determining the spread. This is it. If you tell people not to buy it at more than $2.15 and they can't sell for more than $3 with a $3 spread, you're fixing the rate. We have a fixed rate for the first time in the history, and it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable, all the excuses. And so that is why the economy is collapsing. So this nonsense about sabotage and drug money. The economy, it's as though the PPP told them to put on taxes on all of these issues. Like all the VAT on private airline travel, on education, on health, on on stone and sand and cement that's people use for construction, on plywood and manicold palm, as though we told them to do that. So we are sabotaging the economy. Or for the miners, increase their taxes by 100% or change the 2% final tax. That would kill mining too. Or to raise the rice farmers' fees. Did the PPP go and beat them over the head, go into the cabinet and hand them the policy, these policies to put in place? That's what's killing the economy. This stupid thing that Ramjatan has about this 2 a.m. curfew in periods when people come back home to celebrate, you know, Easter, Christmas, even then, they're shutting down the place at 2 o'clock. People want to go out. Young people, older people, everyone. This is not the Guyanese way. You enhance security. I understand we look at noise, nuisance and stuff, but people, it's part of our culture. It's part of our culture. It's purely nonsensical. We told them to do that. So this sabotage and all of this stuff. And I saw Jordan saying, like today's newspaper, government vows to maintain prudent fiscal policies against external shocks. Quite sure. They have a line. I see you carry a lot of the propaganda here. But what does this mean? Anybody knows what this means? What would something like that mean? Like government vows to maintain prudent fiscal policies against external shocks. And then he goes on to say the same sort of stuff. To address these risks, he says about new risks in Guyana now because things have changed since the budget, global situation has turned against us, which is nonsense. To address these risks, the government will maintain prudent fiscal policies and sound macroeconomic policies, including maintaining clear policies regarding the regulation of exchange rate to provide certainty to workers, businesses, investors, and financial markets. Nonsense. What the fiscal policies are two things. It's taxes and it's expenditure. That's what you talk about, fiscal policies. Is he saying that they're going to cut expenditure to adjust to changing global environment? Or is he saying that we're going to increase expenditure? Is he saying that we're going to cut taxes or increase taxes to get more revenue? That's when it makes sense. That's what fiscal policy is. When you look at the two and you subtract, then either positive or negative, the deficit. That is fiscal policy in a nutshell. What does he mean by fiscal policy in this regard? Somebody needs to ask him. So are you going to cut expenditure or increase expenditure? Are you going to collect more taxes or are you going to reduce the collection of taxes? And that's when it starts making sense to people. This is pure, they hide behind this things that sound good but mean nothing. And they're at sea in that ministry. They're at sea in the Ministry of Finance, sailing rudderlessly all over the place. All over the place. And so I can by the way, he also said, I remember distinctly, I think I was just heading into the interior, that the Clico matter, that somehow I had it wrong because what money am I talking about that they have to collect? Remember I pointed out that there are these two settlements that were made, basically, or two facilities left us with over $30 million US. So what he did for NIS is not really, he just gave them a government debenture, a government paper. But that could be cleared from money that we have left there through two facilities, $30 million. He said he doesn't know about them. Well, the one, Starbuck News, March 2009, headline, Guyana freezes 15 million Bosai loan due to CL Financial from First Citizen Bank Limited of TNT. That's one, and the money is still frozen. It's there, escrowed. If Jordan doesn't know this, he shouldn't be Minister of Finance. That is $15 million that we froze from CL Financial, and that Justice Chang gave that order, and that money is there. That's $3 billion. And secondly, another Stabroek News headline, this time from April 2015. CRL Houston site sold to Monish Worth for $20 million US. And this was advertised in July 2013. That 20 plus 15 is $35 million. So all I'm asking, because since then we don't have access to the accounts, so we should find out. He doesn't know about this. This is $7 billion, over $7 billion alone. And the loan, the debenture that they gave to NIS is $6 billion, less than $6 billion. So I thought that somebody should ask him this, because they lie blatantly. They're like Harman. Well, Harman, I think either incompetence or he has a very dainty memory. And so you recall how he forgot about the $5 million, right, when he went on his pleasure trip to China. That we were supposed to have stolen that $5 million on the GT&T shares. Came back, couldn't answer anything. Well, the people showed up recently and they had negotiations about the $5 million. You didn't hear anything about that. So suddenly he remembers that he says, oh, we don't have this contract for Amila, and that Jagdeo promised to give me this on a CD. What I said in my engagement with some of these ministers in Parliament, talking through the project numbers informally, I realized that people who have criticized this project for several years never read any of the documents. And they had a stack from Ramatar era when they were invited several times to the cabinet and given packages, that they never read the project documents because they had the weirdest ideas about this Amila project and the numbers. From what Clive Thomas said, a 2-point-something billion debt to the Treasury, which is a fantastic figure plucked from the year there was no debt to the Treasury. They had these and they kept repeating anecdotal things. So they read a couple of articles and that's it. And these are members of Parliament. So I said to them, but after the government changed, the government set up a cabinet subcommittee with 6 members. And Brassington told me he gave them a CD with 40 items. I gave you right here. I read out to you. But this media, including Kaichor, has a short memory. I read out to you the elements of that, what was on that CD. There were about 30 items, including feasibility studies, contract, the letter from the IDB that would raise money, the environmental studies. I read every single element out. This was over a year ago that was on that CD. I said, if they gave us the permission, because we have these, we were there in government, I can release it. I don't want to release it without government permission, because these are proprietary documents, and I don't think we should. But if Harman says tomorrow that they have no objection to releasing all of these documents, then we will release them, because they have them. But the problem is, with this government, it's hard to get them to read anything, especially complex pieces of documents. They go to Parliament and can't even read some of their briefs, which is a speech. And so this is the problem we have, incompetence. And Harman says, oh, Jagdeo promised to give us this thing. He has short memory. He forgot all about it. And I genuinely believe he forgot. I genuinely believe he forgot about the whole thing. So they have it. I spoke extensively about this a year ago. I read all the elements of it, that all these things that were on the CD. Norway has this. The IDB has a lot of this information. These are the only people who haven't seen it. And further, because the Kaichor News, I seen them boys say, they gone to the Myla, because that's purely Adam Harris. Adam Harris is part of the cabal too. I heard he writes this. But on the FIP Motilal contract, we urge the government to release the evaluation report that is in the ministry. So the evaluation report will show that there were 5 tenders. Unlike what they are doing, they're not going to tender. There are 5 bids received. That FIP Motilal was the lowest of the bids, and that FIP Motilal and the project was evaluated by someone who was sent by the Clinton Global Initiative, Mr. Walter Willis, who was an engineer there, and there's one other engineer. But you would see the evaluation report, and that recommendation was made to the cabinet. That is it. Not evaluated by politicians. And so we urge them to release it too. And I'm doing so, again, they have these things. So they can easily release. But they have moved from a Myla was criminal to you had an assessment done by Norway. You know what they did? They sneaked in the Norway. Have you seen their draft energy policy? After denying all of this about Amila, suddenly Amila has now reappeared, and we are happy, in the draft energy policy of the government. But Harman may not know about that yet, because by the time they get around to reading these things will be the next election. By the time they get around to reading these things. This anecdotal gap, sit down and they don't even read, so you can't follow up these things. And then that's when they make all of these mistakes. A ton of mistakes that they make, and they mislead people. So we need to move on. If they want, say to Harman, say that the government would not have a problem if all of these documents are released. And there are about 10,000 pages of documents to show the studies done. 10,000 pages of documents, because this was a serious project. So, or maybe we can have a public ceremony to hand it over, a public ceremony. Hand over to them what they have already. Because they seize all the documents from the privatization unit. They have all the documents already. Remember, Soku went there and filled it all up in a van and fetched it away. So they have all the documents from the privatization unit before them. But ask if anyone has gone through those documents. I doubt it. And so we now come to, maybe I just say one more thing, and then I will look at it. So I saw, on the Saru, they have been very busy in the last few weeks. I suspect they now realize that with the passage of this law, that they've all lost their jobs, because the law is passed, and so that is a new, you have to go through a different process of hiring the individuals through Parliament. So all of them, these hostiles, haters of the PPP, who got geriatrics, who got a flunky job, and I don't have a problem with people with political patronage, but you're paying them 4 times what you're paying a doctor. You know, 4 times what you're paying a doctor, so they're over there, and I saw them saying, Hetimaya saying Retimaya or whatever. He's saying that they're salivating. They're going to lose these benefits because I doubt any of them have any qualification to be appointed in the new job, you know, because many of them are not even qualified to be in there, much less to have to go through a transparent process of appointment. But with this government, anything could happen. You know, anything could happen. They could just push it through. So they've lost their jobs. I hope they send them home. But people like, so Eric Phillips and the others, I think they're getting a little bit desperate. So this is the man who threatened to kill everyone in the opposition, and then a week later denied that he ever made such a threat. Yeah, so he can't be trusted. He's then started off that it's the drug money. They're supporting the narrative that drug money is running Guyana, and so creating a niche for themselves, that they have to go after this illegal proceeds, and that somehow Indo-Guyanese have been the major part of this conspiracy, and that Afro-Guyanese in Guyana are worse off because of Indo-Guyanese. So it has shifted now from reparations from the UK, which was the regional agreement, reparations from the UK, etc., to local. And now we have seen him now chipping in on Amerindian land issues. So one wonders about his usefulness. Well, the impartiality, we already know that none of them are impartial. But I've seen he's gone personal. And I don't like getting into the gutter. But we should ask Eric Phillips one thing: why he left South Africa, had to run away from South Africa. And what happened to the child. So, one thing. And secondly, we'd have to, I'd talk a little bit more about Guyana Goldfields, because when I was president, we had a full-fledged investigation into, which became part of a treason trial that had Guyana Goldfields implicated. And so I wonder if Guyana Goldfields is supporting this because they have been silent on this, his public statements, racist statements, as well as threats to kill people, and he is their representative. And if now I have the feeling, given that history, which I will speak about sometime in the future, I believe they're doing this, maybe he has their support. So that is it. Secondly, I see Mr. Hetimaya now has moved from independent professional to a politician. I see he said, I was now married. That was one of his thing after I said the unit is corrupt, and they're corrupt to the core. And I repeat that today. He said I was now married. I misled people. That I want to get my hand on gold money, the oil money. That Jagdeo hungry for power and getting hands on upcoming oil, salivating for power. I'm just giving you the quotation, salivating for power. Of course, the People's Progressive Party wants to win the elections. And so I may agree with him on one, that we're working hard to win the elections. But this is the head of an impartial unit that has to investigate people. Jagdeo hungry for power. I want to get my hands on upcoming oil money, salivating for power, etc. Now, I saw, so, and then he said, will Jagdeo take a polygraph test? And let me say something. All along my entire life I've been here, when this man ran away from Guyana to live in the United States, I was here as president working to bring benefits to this country. The only reason he has a job now is because he's a friend of Mr. Granger and the administration. He didn't go through a transparent process of elections. And this person, imagine a geriatric come back now to enjoy all the spoils of office without any transparent process. Without any transparent process. When he was doing menial tasks and being a security guard, and there's nothing wrong being a security guard, as I'm told that he was doing abroad, I was busy working to develop this country. And that's what he was doing abroad. And the only reason he's enjoying the spoils of office now is because of contacts, not through transparent process. So why should I even bother with him? If Granger says, let's take a polygraph test together, and I determine the questions that he could be asked of him, he could determine the questions that could be asked of me. That would be a brilliant thing to do. Then we could have one together, because Granger is president, I was ex-president, leader of the opposition. You think I will even bother with a man who is fighting for the benefits? And let me tell you, the day that this administration changes, these people will disappear after creating all this trouble here, and we will have, those of us who live here, will have to continue fighting to change this country. They'll disappear. And so I'm now wasting my time with people, and since they got a bit personal, I thought I just tell you how I feel about them. That they are not making, how their cushy jobs, they get tens of millions of dollars in salaries every month. What contribution, how are they contributing to jobs across this country, young people? Or even in South Georgetown. They hide behind this facade of fighting for Afro-Guyanese rights, a lot of them. And not a single thing have they done for ordinary people. Taking away people's lands out in West Coast Bobbies. Afro-Guyanese people taking away their lands, this administration. People, ordinary people, Indo-Guyanese, Afro-Guyanese, any other race, Amerindian, etc. You're not getting the benefits of the spoils in office. So they can't be the benefit dealing with a lot of these people. I would not ever allow them to lecture me. Not these people who have not made any contribution to this country and to its development. Let me make it clear that we will continue to expose all of these things, the transgressions, the wrongdoing, and we will fight them. And there is no expectation whatsoever that we could get any justice from that unit. They would act impartially, having made these public statements, act impartially in relation to any PPP official. And I find it very strange that the British High Commission would put an advisor in that unit, given the way it was put together, no, not through public advertisement, a transparent way. Secondly, given that all the individuals of a particular race. Thirdly, that they are all known political activists and PPP haters, that they would implant an advisor there, and I hope that that advisor is not doing the same thing like Mr. Settleton, that the British High Commissioner denied he was doing, and found that the country found that it was not being truthful. And we're still to deal with that matter yet. It's not over. We're still to deal with that matter yet, because we have not been, we are waiting a clarification, but a clarification does not seem to be forthcoming. Thank you. Yes, question. I've called on a press conference over and over. The president is not, I hope he's not deaf, but the same ones. And at one stage they said they had an investigation. They had an investigation going. At one stage, we thought it would have yielded results. This was about a year ago. These are huge gangs. Right. Yes. Yes, I have, no, I went through that phase where people submitted names. And so, as I said before, we looked at the names and shortlisted 8 persons. And now I have met with some of the 8. Some asked me to have time to consider the matter, then I had to leave for the interior. I've not met with others. So I will meet with the others and then call those who wanted time to consider the matter, and then see what the response will be. Yes, because already one person said to me, no, I would have liked to do it, but my time wouldn't allow me to do it. I'm too busy doing something else. Well, then we can go back to the table and find new people, some others who are on the list from before, the original list that civil society submitted.
I have a few quick questions, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
You said that the consultations will be completed in a week.
No.
Consultations,
yeah.
sorry. Consultations will be completed in a week. Are you saying that after those consultations, at the end of the week, are you going to be submitting the names at the end of the week, or do you need another week after the consultation period?
No. Once I finish the consultation with the people, these are with the people, not now the organizations, with the people who who the nominees, basically. Once I complete those, I will have to give some people some time. Some people would say yes immediately, and maybe some others will say, give me a couple of days. Once I get the assurances from them that I can put forward a name, then I will submit.
So you suppose that your list would be ready within that 1 2 weeks?
You see, I don't like, yes, definitely. I don't want to put, maybe if I can go through the process by the end of this week, and they all accept